Hello there, world of tankers, I'm Turtles Blitz, and in today's video, we're going to be talking about the brand new French Super Everyday AMX M4 MLE 54. Now, this Tier 10 French tank, as I just said, is going to be coming into the game within the next couple of months, and it's going to be hitting super testing very, very soon. Now, sadly, this is going to be a collector tank. I would love to have seen an entire French tech tree, but this is going to be only acquirable by probably crates the first time it does come out. I don't really know anything about that, but in today's video, we're not only going to be showing you what the tank looks like, as you can see here, I'm also going to be breaking into the statistics of the tank. So looking wise, it pretty much looks exactly like the AMX M4 MLE 49, which pretty much makes sense because it pretty much would be the tier 10 version of it. So it's got very similar armor profile, and we're going to be breaking into that, of course, in just a little bit. But yeah, you can see that the tank looks very similar to most of the French heavies in the game currently, especially the AMX M4, as I did just say. Now, thankfully, Blitzhanger does have the statistics posted for us here, so I'm going to be breaking down everything you need to know about the vehicle. Now, of course, this is just the bare basics of the tank, I do know. In fact, this vehicle hasn't even hit super testing yet. Players are about to get it within the next couple of days, so yeah, the statistics here we are saying are just the basics. As we know, the Super Conqueror, when I went over that, when it first was starting in super testing, way before it came into the game, the Super Conqueror changed a crazy amount with the gun, with everything else, so the AMX could be changing the same way. They're always subject to change, judging how they do, but we're just going to be talking about what you can expect with the vehicle when it does come into the game. So first of all, what is good about this tank? Well, it's got 2,500 hit points, which is a pretty beefy amount. That's the same as your IS-7, which means that if you're running the hit point buff, you're going to be going all the way up to 2,650. So you're going to be a little bit more of a brawling heavy tank. You've got the more hit points, which is about 250 more than your average tank like the T110E5, your WZ113, even the 5A. Definitely something I wish more heavies, kind of had that 2,600 mark, but that's one thing that this tank is really going to have, which is good for it. As well, it's got the second best view range in the game for a tier 10 heavy tank, which is pretty dang nice at 282.5 meters. But of course, this is a big and tall heavy tank, so it's probably going to need that good view range to outspot the enemy if they're going to be spotting you every single moment you do try and peek. Now, the firepower. So this tank has a decent damage per minute. It's 2,715. It's not spectacular, but when you compare it to an IS-4, it's definitely adequate. Like the IS-4 sitting at, I think, 2,500. So this definitely is a little bit more than average. Now, the standard penetration at 265 is pretty dang nice. In fact, the second best out of all tier 10 heavies. And the VK90, of course, is like 280, so that's light years ahead. But the cool thing about this vehicle is that the premium is also AP shells, as you can see. And that's why the standard pen, or should I say the premium pen, looks so poor. In fact, one of the worst in the tier 10 class is because I would suggest, if you do end up pulling out this vehicle, to run calibrated. Now, of course, that looks just like your 5As, 330, but the thing is heat, which, most tier 10 heavies carry, the IS-4, the WZ-111 5A, the WZ-113, they all carry heat, which, of course, calibrated gives you a massive buff, 374 millimeters of heat pen on your IS-4, but the thing is that AP has 5 degrees of shell normalization, so this 326 is actually about 360, 350 millimeters on average, so still pretty dang nice for the standard and premium pen on the AMX. We're going to have to see, of course, how it does work when we do get into some real gameplay, though, in the future. Now, the high explosive as well is pretty dang nice at 65 millimeters, dealing 620 average damage. And yeah, that's right, because the standard damage on this tank is 480. So it's actually got a very nice alpha. It's kind of in the middle. It's a little bit more than your IS-7, so it's going to deal 480, where your IS-7 would deal 460. So this is going to be a great tank again to brawl, I think, because it's got the decent damage per minute. It's got a decent amount of hit points. It's got a decent reload as well. So overall, it's just going to be a really solid tank, I think, on the gun statistics, because it does do that extra little bit of damage. And the premium pen is still, with its premium damage at 400, it's still a pretty beefy amount. So I really do want to see how this tank is going to perform when it does come into the game. But that 480 damage is something that I'm really looking forward to, because, of course, I always love that big damage numbers. Now, the gun handling, it doesn't look spectacular. It's about middle of the barrel here. It's got 1.9 second aiming time, which when you multiply it by 3, because, of course, this is 1/3, it's using PC statistics, so it's about 1/3, so I'd say it's about a 6-second aiming time. Definitely not great. That aiming time, you're going to have to worry about it a little bit, but at the same time, this is meant to be a frontline heavy tank. Yes, I know, it's amazing to hear that the same country that made the AMX 50B is also a frontline heavy, but yes, this tank is going to be a full-on brawling badass heavy tank. Now, the dispersion at 0.326 is also pretty dang good. Also, sorry if I'm slurring my words. I literally have 0 hours of sleep tonight. Like, I did an all-nighter, played some GTA, played some Blitz, and I'm pretty much going to fall dead asleep as soon as I do get this video out. But as I was going back to it, dispersion on this tank is 0.326, which is pretty dang good, you know, especially for a 130mm. This is like your IS-7 you're comparing it to, not some accurate WD-113. Dispersion factors on the move when rotating after shot, also pretty dang good. Now, after shot really isn't going to matter that much here because, of course, it's got a 10-second reload, so you're going to fully aim in by the time you've shot anyways, so that's not really anything that matters. But dispersion on the move is something that's quite important, judging that this tank goes a total of 45 kilometers per hour. Again, very nice that it's got great mobility. So it's also coming with 8 degrees of gun depression. That is, of course, fantastic. The gun elevation at 15 degrees isn't spectacular, but that gun depression more than enough makes up for it. That means that you can work pretty much all ridge lines you do need to in the game. You're on a map like Mines, you are going to dominate that position. Now, the turret traverse speed as well, best in class at 43.74. And that definitely makes sense because you're going to see when we do pull up the armor profile, oh boy, you do not want to get hit in the side of the turret. Now, this tank is a big fat boy, weighing in at 62 tons almost, so it definitely weighs a lot, which is going to be great for ramming when this thing does go 45 kilometers per hour. Also goes 20 in reverse, the quickest out of all tier 10 heavies currently. Again, great for the mobility. Literally, it can go half the speed it goes forward in reverse. So the effector power to weight ratio isn't spectacular, but again, being able to go 45 without any engine and power, improved boost, or anything like that, I really think that this is also going to be a super strong tank in the tournament world. And wait until you see the armor profile, really. It is quite crazy. Now, traverse speed, that definitely seems to be a little bit of an issue. Not necessarily super fast at only 30.37, especially on soft terrain at only 19.18. It's definitely a little bit slower, so I'm not sure if that's going to cause it to bog down. Again, when we do see how this vehicle is in real gameplay, we're going to find out. But remember, I said this is a very tall and bad concealment vehicle, and that's why I had a good view range. Well, yeah, you can see concealment, you're not really going to be getting away unscathed if you are out in the open, so it's got terrible, terrible armor. It's a very large tank, so therefore it also has terrible statistics on the concealment. So that does make sense, of course, but, you know, if you're running a mouse or something, you also don't expect to have great concealment. The job of a mouse is to take shots and deal the damage for your team and block a bunch of shots. So normally I would look at the armor here, but I actually like to show a full in-depth armor profile. So if we go over back to Armor Inspector here, they actually do have the tank in the Blitz variant. It's just looking at the armor profile in Armor Inspector, my number one go-to. If you guys don't use Armor Inspector, by the way, Armor Inspector, I would love if you guys would sponsor me, please. But Armor Inspector shows all of the armor in a very nice way. You can look at the X-ray, where all the modules are inside the tanks. You got a bunch of different stuff here. I think Armor Inspector is really fantastic on the way it does work, but we're going to be using the penetration values in today's episode because I want to show how thick the frontal skull on this tank is. Now, this is an IS-4 aiming at the front of your AMX. Now, I would suggest if you're ever running an IS-4 to run on calibrated. So even with calibrated on, you can see it barely makes a difference. So the frontal armor on this tank is fantastic. The upper plate at 365mm thick pretty much means that any standard shells fired at that upper plate are going to ricochet. Even from like tier 10 tank destroyers, you're really going to get a lot of bounces on that upper plate. Not only is the upper plate super strong, it also has very strong little edges on the cutout. 300mm thick there. That's actually the weakest spot, though, I will say, if you ever do come up against this vehicle in the future. The little cutouts here, like the IS-4 has, those are the biggest weak spots. So you definitely would want to aim at it like this if you want to have your best chance of bouncing the shots. Now, this little bar in the middle, that definitely is a weak spot. You can see that it's got like 2 little cutaways on how the lower plate works, which can be quite trolly, as you know, because, you know, somebody might think, oh, this is part of the lower plate, shoot at it, and it does end up ricocheting, but it does have quite a large lower plate, and if you're loading heat, well, you can definitely see that that lower plate does become quite apparent. But at the same time, that's still great armor, judging that this is literally 374mm of heat penetration. Now, also you have to remember that this tank has 8 degrees of gun depression. So let's say you're hiding that lower plate completely right now. Even with heat shells, you literally cannot penetrate the frontal armor of this tank with an IS-4. Now, you can start to think how crazy and ludicrous this armor profile is. The upper plate, literally 500mm thick with 8 degrees of gun depression. Can't get through the gun mantlet, literally 500mm thick. Can't get through the turret. This doesn't count as armor. So, yeah, you can see that the AMX AMX, even let's say we were pulling out a Jagdpanzer, the highest pen out of any tier 10 TD in the game, using heat with calibrated on, still literally cannot penetrate this vehicle, and here's the heat, still literally can't pen the vehicle in a hull down position. This is going to be a ridiculously thick vehicle if you're using it hull down. Again, you can see those little cutaways are quite weak, but that's ridiculous how thick the frontal armor is on the tank. Now, there are a couple weak spots, of course. It does have this little bar underneath the turret, but honestly, that's not really a weak spot. That's still 300 millimeters thick, and when you're in a gun depression position, well, you can see all of your troubles fade away right there. Not only that, you think, hey, that cupola right on the roof of the vehicle, that is quite weak, and it is extremely weak, only 200 millimeters thick on average, but you have to remember that's all the way at the back of the turret. It's quite hard to tell here, but this is a super tall tank. This is like aiming at the mouse's height. So again, when you're looking at this vehicle, you're going to be looking at it like this here. This tank deals 480 damage. So even if you do manage to just clear that shot, if you're in an IS-4, you can barely see that in the first place. You're aiming up at this big, tall tank that's easily going to pen you, looking down on your hull, making your armor even weaker. So yeah, this tank is really going to be a beast in my opinion. Now in World of Tanks PC, the side armor of the AMX is only 65 millimeters thick, but Blitz thought, you know what, let's double it. Let's make it 130 millimeters thick. So also the side armor on this vehicle is going to bounce a lot of shells because you can angle it kind of like an E75 here, you can see, and get a lot of ricochets right in the side. Now again, you can pen it in that cutaway, but you can always use your side scraping abilities on this vehicle and get a couple bounces in the side. It's very nice that it's actually going to have decent side armor. So a lot of things are actually very nice about this vehicle. Now you remember before I said that it's good that it has a very quick turret traverse, and there's a reason for that being, as I said, because yeah, 82 millimeters thick on the side of the turret is absolutely awful. That means that any HEs from coming like a 130 or higher is easily going to penetrate right in the side of the turret. You can see it's very weak pretty much all around. Now this bar at the front is actually quite impressive. You have to remember that this is a Jagdpanzer. If we go back to, you know, like let's say the mouse, you'll see that that does actually have quite thick armor at the frontal bar there. So it still will do the occasional bounce if you are aiming away, but yeah, pretty much if anybody's aiming at the side of your turret, don't let them shoot at it because it's very quickly going to fall apart. And that's where I do see this vehicle is going to have its balancing factors, because when you're dealing with more than one opponent, let's say Susie's over to the left and Bob's over to the right, well, you're aiming at Susie and Bob's over here. Well, yeah, Bob's your uncle and pretty much pens you right every single time. So, a lot of weaknesses on this vehicle. The side armor, super weak, as you can see. The rear of this vehicle as well is quite weak, but one thing is that it's actually not ridiculously weak. Like, 120 millimeters are going to struggle to pen HE in it. Same for the rear of the turret. It's not super duper weak that, like, your day's going to be ruined, but at the same time, if a 150 millimeter gets the rear of your tank, it's easily going to pen. But the nice thing is 120s cannot pen the side of the vehicle. So, I actually think that this AMX is going to be a fantastic tier 10 vehicle. I do think kind of shame on Wargaming for making it a crate tank, or you know, it's just going to be a collector, which is kind of shame on them because I really wanted to have this tank come into the game as a tech tree. It would have been a great addition and franchise to the actual French tech tree, as they haven't shown much love to it as it is. Kind of cool to have a French armored vehicle, and as happy as I am to see this come into the game, and I'm still ecstatic that I really wanted to get this tank in. I literally made a video talking about top 5 tanks I want to be added to Blitz, and this was one of the top 5. So I'm really happy that it's going to be added. It's just that, yeah, I'm not necessarily too happy that it's going to be coming in the way that it is. Probably in the Blitz fair, I honestly don't know, but we'll find out in the future. But let me know what you guys think in the comments down below, if you think that this tank's going to be great or it's going to be awful. But of course, if you enjoyed this type of content, please make sure to smash that subscribe button down below. It really does help out the channel, especially because I'm about to fall asleep after sleep deprivation. But other than that, I hope you're all doing well out there. Stay happy, stay healthy, and I'll see you in the next one.